This is the History Guy, with a special episode about Julius Caesar and the Roman Republic. This is Chapter 10, Crushing the Cimbri and Teutones. Our story begins in the summer of 102 BCE. The Roman legions were once again facing off against the Cimbri and Teutones. Last year, Gaius Marius had beaten them at the Battle of Aquasec. And if you're new here, we've actually done an episode about that battle before. You can find it right up here. In fact, just to remind you how crazy that battle was, let me read you this passage from Plutarch's Life of Marius. It says, "The fight now grew so fierce that there was no possibility of either side giving way or yielding. The enemy fought on every side alike, not only in the open field where our men were, but also in the marshes, on the hills and everywhere. Some tried to turn our flank, some attacked our rear. Our men fought desperately with those who attacked them in the open, and they stood firm against those who charged up the hills. Spears were hurled, swords clashed, cavalry clashed. There was nothing to stop the bloodshed. Men fell on both sides, though most of them were slain in the marsh. But despite all their fierceness, the Gauls couldn't withstand the disciplined Roman attack led by Gaius Marius. As the historian Arpinum put it, Marius, being the first general who made use of the discipline of his soldiers for attack as well as defense, gave orders for the legions to form 4 deep ranks. Each one advancing as the one before, it gave way and continued the attack without confusion. But even though they lost more than 120 elephants and over 40,000 warriors, the Cimbri and Teutones refused to retreat. They stayed in the field for 3 days until they had eaten all of their supplies. When their food ran out, they left and went back to their lands, licking their wounds and waiting for another day. So when Marius learned that they had retreated back into northern Italy, he followed after them, determined to crush them once and for all. In the spring of 101 BCE, Marius and his army marched north to a place called Vercellae, near the modern town of Vercellae in northern Italy. Here he faced an army of over 60,000 Gauls, many of whom were still angry over what happened at Aquasec. But this time Marius was prepared. First, he chose a perfect location for his camp, selecting a high-level spot near a river that was protected by marshland. Then he divided his forces into 5 detachments, under the command of 5 experienced generals. Finally, he held a council of war and shared his battle plan with his officers. In essence, his strategy was pretty simple. The Gauls were much more numerous than the Romans, so instead of trying to defeat them head-on, Marius planned to bait them into attacking him. He then would lure them away from their camp, wear them down, and finally crush them with the full force of his legions. So after completing his preparations, he gave the order to begin the show. The Roman detachment on the far left of the line pretended to waver and retreat, which lured a large number of Gauls away from their camp. At the same time, the rest of the Roman army maintained a strong defensive posture, ready to repulse any attack. And as expected, the Gauls jumped at the chance to destroy the retreating Romans, but they fell right into Marius's trap. As the Gauls surged forward, the Roman center held their ground, inflicting heavy casualties while slowly giving way. This caused the Gauls to become overextended on their left wing, allowing the Roman detachment that had been hiding in the marshlands to slip behind them and cut off their retreat. With their escape route cut off, the Gauls on the left wing found themselves trapped and vulnerable. And that's when Marius unleashed the second part of his plan. The Roman center, pretending to be exhausted, suddenly counterattacked, driving the remaining Gauls back towards their own camp. With the Gauls now caught between 2 powerful Roman forces, their fate was sealed. Marius ordered the entire Roman army to advance, and the Gauls broke and fled in all directions. The Romans pursued them relentlessly, inflicting massive casualties, until the entire army of the Cimbri and Teutones was utterly destroyed. The survivors fled back to their camps, where they committed mass suicide rather than surrender to the mercy of the Romans. When news of these victories reached Rome, the people went wild. They celebrated for 25 days and 25 nights, honoring Marius as the 3rd founder of Rome. You see, Rome was founded traditionally in 753 BCE, and since then, there had been 2 other times when Rome had been saved from destruction. The first was in 494 BCE, when the plebeians threatened to leave the city unless their demands for political representation were met. The second was in 366 BCE, when the patricians lifted the 366-day siege imposed on the plebeians during the secession of the plebis. Marius defeated the Cimbri and Teutones was seen as the third time Rome had been saved, hence the third founder. As a result of these celebrations, statues were erected in his honor throughout the city and along the road from the capital to the battlefield, and the people even dedicated a triumph to him. Although triumphs were usually reserved for emperors, not generals. Furthermore, because of these victories, Marius was elected consul for a second time, which was virtually unheard of in ancient Rome. It was only done twice in the entire history of the Republic before, and both times it was because of civil war. But in Marius's case, it was because of a foreign war. And that wasn't all. The tribunes of the plebs proposed that Marius should be appointed dictator, the highest office in ancient Rome, which granted him absolute power. And believe me, this was no honor for Marius, because he absolutely hated the idea of dictatorship. In fact, he said to Caesar that he would rather lose all his property than spend one night as a dictator. Nevertheless, he accepted the honor, although it only lasted a few months, and he used his power to institute reforms in the military, such as granting land to his veterans. But the real prize was the consulship, because it gave Marius control of Rome's finances, and that allowed him to maintain a standing army, something that had never been done before. You see, in normal times, the Roman legions were demobilized after a campaign and sent back to their farms. However, Marius kept his army intact and paid them to stay in service, and that created all sorts of problems. To learn more about them, join me next time for Chapter 11, The Marian Reforms. In the meantime, if you want to check out some of our other videos, just click right here. Remember to subscribe and come back soon. Thank you for watching. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.